Coming up on this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, we are headed right now into the holiday season. That means a lot of money being spent by consumers, and scammers are after that money. To protect it, we're going to talk to the AARP Director of Fraud Prevention. But first, a subject that we're all on top of every single day, Pennsylvania's roads. We'll talk about the progress that has been made in 2024 and what lies ahead after this break.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Roche from WGAL News TV based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm your guest host today, and we're going to be talking about fraud and fraud prevention going into the holiday season. We'll have the director of the AARP Fraud Prevention Unit. But first, we're going to talk about roads today. We all have to use them. We all have to drive on them. We all have to experience them. And joining us to discuss that is Bob Latham, the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. That's an organization of about 400 members that basically you have a vested interest in everything highways and roads in Pennsylvania. So let's start with this question. You've heard this joke, I'm sure, many, many times. There's two seasons in Pennsylvania, construction and winter. So it seems kind of funny to ask you about how is one particular year fared. How has 2024 been for road construction, highway construction in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it's been very active. We've been very fortunate to have a robust transportation and capital program this year, mostly funded by the Federal Highway Act of 2021, known as the Infrastructure Investment Act. We have a lot of projects going on here. For viewers in central Pennsylvania, they're certainly familiar with all the work that's going on Interstate 83. There's work on I-95 in Philadelphia, some of the major bridges in the Pittsburgh area. But that points out one thing, and that is that because of the federal money, most of the work is on our interstate system. So what we are seeing is sort of a lack of funds for more rural roads and rural bridges, and that's something we want to talk about here later.
Let's talk about money. Let's focus in on that. We have a new administration coming into Washington. We all know that money makes roads, builds roads. Is that a major concern for your organization going forward with the new presidential administration coming in?
No, not at all. President Trump is a builder. He has always been in favor of investing in national infrastructure, we'll say, and that includes roads, bridges, transit, ports, railroads, etc. So we don't see that as what you would say a threat to our program. There may be some trimming around the edges of some of the things that the Biden administration was interested in, such as funding for electric vehicle charging stations and things of that nature. They could be on the chopping block. It's pure speculation, and I'm not saying one way or the other whether that's good or bad. But as far as investment in pavements, rehabilitation of bridges and that sort of thing, we think we'll be fine going forward. However, it will be up to Congress and the administration to reauthorize that program here in 2026. So there'll be a lot of discussion about where that goes and what it looks like. We're also told, but Sean Duffy, the new Transportation Secretary, was always supportive of infrastructure investment when he was a member of Congress from Wisconsin.
So we also know that Pennsylvania has one of the highest gas taxes in the entire country. I think it's the third highest in the entire country. And some of that money, and maybe I'm mixing apples and oranges here, some of that money has been redirected to the state police. What happened this past year in taking some of that money away from the state police and redirecting that?
So got to give Governor Shapiro all the credit for this. When he came in, he started a program for the state police, a special fund in the general fund to make sure that we had plenty of troopers, we had new classes of state police coming in and that sort of thing. And that allowed us to keep money in the highway fund that heretofore was being siphoned out of the highway fund, or what we call the motor license fund, into the state police. So the state police did not take a cut of any kind in their budget. But what had happened is over a period of time, we were able to claw back, I guess, if you will, some of that money back into the highway program, a total of $600 million this year versus about 6 years ago. And that step down, if you will, continues. The governor's made that commitment. We appreciate that. Legislative leaders have made that commitment. So we're going to go back all the way so that the motorists who who are paying that relatively high gas tax will see that that money is going to fix roads and bridges and not to what we would call a general fund program.
But people who own electric cars do not pay a gas tax. This year something changed at that. The little subsidy that came in about 30 seconds?
Sure. So electric vehicles now, owners of electric vehicles will now pay a higher registration fee than owners of gas-powered vehicles, and that'll be commensurate with what a gas-powered vehicle owner pays in gas taxes. So it's kind of a fairness issue. It kicks in 2025.
And that happened that quickly this year after a little bit of discussion.
Right. It took 6 years, but got it done.
Very good. All right. Not everything is rosy, though, Bob. We're going to talk about the challenges that lie ahead. We're back after this break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
And welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. I'm your guest host this week, Brian Roche. We are talking to Bob Latham, the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors, basically a highway organization that's very interested in what's going on out on our roads, building things. So we talked a little bit about funding. We talked a little bit about the good from 2024. There are still some challenges ahead. A large percentage of PennDOT's funding, as you kind of alluded to in our first segment, going to be spent on just a few particular projects, 95, 83. Does that money need to be spread around a little bit more?
Well, you're right. So what we found is in the coming year, while PennDOT will have about a $3 billion a year capital spending program or contracting program, which is good. So that means we're going to be employing a lot of people, fixing a lot of our major roads and that sort of thing. But roads are very, very expensive. And so what we're seeing is some of these major projects, only about 15 or 16 major projects are going to take up about 2/3 of that, which is going to leave some of the rural. PennDOT has 40,000 miles of roadway, by the way, which is larger than their network is larger than New England and New York combined. So we have a very large highway network, a lot of bridges, 26,000 bridges in Pennsylvania. And while we fixed a lot of them in the past, we have more to do. So those more rural, smaller, what we call 3 and 4 digit, that's a terminology, roads that are important to farmers, that are important to people that live out in that area, but they're wanting for money right now.
You're talking about roads, and you mentioned 26,000 bridges in Pennsylvania. It seems obviously roads are an issue, but it seems that whenever I hear about problems on the roads, it's more specifically about the bridges.
Yes.
What is it with Pennsylvania bridges?
Well, what it is with Pennsylvania bridges is, to quote a former Secretary of Transportation, the state is old, cold, and it's wet. And so that's, and that doesn't do very well with steel and concrete. And so, and let's look at it. Our interstate system, for example, was built in the 1950s and 60s. So it's 60, 70 years old. Bridges are built to a 50 to 100-year lifespan. So most of these are now aging out and need to be fixed, replaced, et cetera. And so there's two things now that we're looking at going forward. Number one is, of course, public transit, which is a very important aspect of life for many people in Pennsylvania. It touches 67 counties. Of course, the famous part of it, of course, is in the southeast, where they're struggling with their transit system there for funding. An attempt to get funding for the southeast transit system failed last year, which means the problem didn't go away. Recently, Governor Shapiro kind of shifted some highway project money over as a stopgap for transit. That's certainly not a long-term solution to take money from one segment and put it into the other, and I think the governor recognizes that. But that's going to be a top-tier issue this spring is funding not only for public transit but also for roads and bridges. We've been encouraged that our legislative leaders and the governor have recognized that.
We have about a minute left, Bob. Where is that money going to come from? Do we have to restructure taxes? Do we have to restructure fees? Where can we get it from?
Well, on the transit side, that's going to be a challenge. On the highway side, we have a number of different ideas that can possibly be explored. Obviously, our gas tax is very high, and that's probably not an option. We do have a relatively low vehicle sales tax. We have a relatively low vehicle registration fee. There are some things that we can do with that. A combination of bond financing, which a number of states do. You can bond bridges, and that can be part of the strategy as well for highway and bridge construction.
If you got to go on better roads. I've seen that phrase.
That was our theme 40 years ago.
Bob Latham, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today. Coming up still on Pennsylvania Newsmakers, we're going to talk about fraud headed into the holiday season. You want to spend your money, the scammers want to steal it. We'll be right back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
And welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. I'm your guest host this week, Brian Roche of WGAL-TV in Lancaster. A new AARP Fraud Watch report highlights the way the criminals are targeting consumers this holiday season. The report shows that 4 out of 5 people, 82% of U.S. consumers, have experienced some type of fraud this year. And joining us to talk about that now is Kathy Stokes, AARP's Director of Fraud Prevention Programs. Kathy, should I be shocked by this number that 82% have been targeted by some type of a scam?
Well, people are a little shocked by it, Brian, because maybe it makes us all a little bit more aware that fraud is everywhere.
What would you say are some of the other highlights from this year's AARP Fraud Watch report, and how often do you folks do this kind of study?
We do a holiday scam study every year. I think we've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now. And we do ask a lot of the same questions to get sort of a sense of if things are getting bad or if things are getting worse. And everything's trending toward the bad, unfortunately. One of the bigger scams that we're seeing that's really growing, and I'm sure nobody will be surprised, you get that text message from U.S. Postal or FedEx or one of the other big carriers saying there's a problem with the shipment and you need to click on this link. And that's going to try to take you to a fake website that looks like the website you think you're going to. And likely they're going to try to get you to put in your credit card information to pay for some payment that hasn't been made so that you can get your package. 56% of us have experienced getting that text and finding it to be fraudulent just in the last 12 months.
Kathy, the thing I like to point out to people I talk to about that particular scam is that we really, truly do not know what could be behind that link if you press on it. I've had many people say to me, Brian, really, tell me what goes on if you hit that link. We really don't know, do we? They can vary that and change it, right?
Oh, there are so many different things that can happen. I mean, the most basic version is they're trying to steal credit card information. But you could simply click on that link and expose your device to malicious software where they're trying to download something onto your device that will capture your username and password every time you log into any account, including your financial accounts. And once they have that, they have access to monetize the non-financial accounts, and they have access directly to your financial accounts. They can wipe you out.
And Kathy, even though you represent AARP, this does not just involve senior citizens, does it?
Absolutely not. And I'm really glad you brought that up, Brian, because for many years we've allowed ourselves to assume that this only happens to older adults because maybe there's some cognitive decline or they're too trustworthy or they're not tech savvy enough. And most of that, it's just a trope. It happens to everybody. And younger people report fraud losses more often when fraud is reported. But the big kicker there is the older adult has the assets typically. And when the criminals realize they have that older adult on the line, they try to take everything from them, and it's devastating.
Kathy, let's talk about these peer-to-peer apps like Venmo, Zelle, Cash App to pay for things. Are they safe? I mean, do you recommend them to people? Would you tell people to stay away? What's the problem? What could be the potential problem with these things?
Well, I think they're generally safe if you use them as these companies say they intend for you to use them in fine print. But that is, I have kids that they just finished college, but when they were in college and they needed some money, I would Zelle them some money. And I felt okay about that because I was sending it to my kids. I sometimes have used it to pay for somebody who does regular work for me, walking the dog or whatever like that. But when you use it to pay for something from a retailer you've never done business with before, or you're trying to send money to someone and by mistake you hit the wrong number, you're not protected in those situations. So a lot of people think it's just like using a credit card, but it's not. And we learned in one of our questions that we ask every year that more people than last year think that peer-to-peer payments are as safe as using a credit card. So we're actually losing our knowledge on.
Speaking of cards, we give and take a lot of gift cards this time of the year. When we come back after this break, we're going to talk about how those gift cards could be used in a fraudulent manner. We'll be right back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania American Water. We keep life flowing across the Keystone State.
And welcome back. I'm guest host Brian Roche sitting in this week, and we're talking to Kathy Stokes, AARP's Director of Fraud Prevention Programs. AARP recently released their annual Fraud Watch report. And Kathy, let's talk a little bit about gift cards. They are great to give to people during the holiday season, but they can also be used for nefarious reasons by scammers. Let's talk about that a little bit. What can they do with these?
Well, let's take it in two lanes here. The first thing is purchasing a gift card and giving it to somebody as a gift. We all love getting them. We all love receiving them. But 30% or so of us have either given or received a gift card just in the last 12 months that has had no value on it. And that's because criminals have figured out how to drain those funds before we get a chance to spend them. They will send people to go into a retailer, to that big shiny card rack, pull those cards off those racks, manipulate the cards so that they can get the information on the back, cover that back up so you can't really tell that they did that, put them right back up on the rack and just wait. And as soon as people start buying those cards that they now can track, as soon as that purchase is made, the scammers just drain the funds. They can also do that online, though. There's something that a technology called ghost bots sort of acts like a human, but it's out there pinging accounts that have a credit card or a gift card value on them. And when they find a card that has value on it, they can drain it. So this is why we're seeing so many people getting a card or giving a card that has no value on it.
Well, scammers also get victims to go and purchase these gift cards as a form of payment for their scams, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And it's important to understand when a criminal is attacking someone in a fraud attempt, they've gotten them to believe pretty much anything that criminal says. They've gotten them into a heightened emotional state. So it stands to reason they can make you believe things that aren't true. For example, go down to the corner store, put $300 on each of 5 different gift cards, and then leave the store and tell me what those numbers are, and your problem is solved. And that is absolutely not true, but they're really good at making us believe that. So anytime you hear anybody say gift card when they're trying to get you to pay for an urgent matter, know that it's a scam and disengage.
Let's talk about buying gifts online. I know that in the past 4 or 5 days, I must have purchased probably a half a dozen things for my grandchildren online. But what are some warning signs you want to relay to people about buying gifts online this holiday season?
Yeah, I think there are two things to be just really cautious with. And the first is when you're on social media, visiting with friends and family, scrolling through, and you get that ad that gives you that great discount on the thing you wanted to get your grandkid. Just don't believe that it's true. Unfortunately, so many of us, like more than half of us, do some shopping through these social media ads online, but a third of us have experienced fraud doing it. So you really just can't trust those ads. And if you get an email or you get a text message and you think it's from the retailer you most often do business with, don't trust that that link is going to take you to that website. It may look like that website, but they're trying often to get you to come to a copycat website so that they can steal your login information, your credit card information. When you want to go and purchase something online, go to what you know. If you're an Amazon client customer, you have an account. Go to that account. Type in Walmart.com, Target.com. Don't click a link to it because those links could take you to a copycat site.
Kathy, we have about 2 minutes left. Two things I want to discuss with you. First of all, porch pirates. We all know them. We all hate them. How can we protect our packages when they're delivered? Keep them away from these porch pirates.
Yeah, 25% of us have experienced having something stolen by a porch pirate. A couple of things you can do. One is you can put a note into the shipping details and say that you want that package dropped off out back where somebody can't see it under a bush. Or you could ask for your shipments to be held if that's an option, and you can go pick them up. Or some of these retailers, Amazon has these lockers where you can go and pick them up. It's important to know what's coming and when. Help your friends out, help your neighbors out. If you see a package out at your neighbors and you know they're not there, hold it for them.
In your annual Fraud Watch report that we were talking about earlier, a lot of people apparently don't know how safe credit cards can be. They offer them protections. Elaborate on that a little bit. How do they offer protection when you use a credit card to buy something?
Yeah, when you use a credit card and you don't get what you asked for, or in some way it was an unauthorized transaction, someone stole your credit card numbers, the credit card company is on the hook for that. You may have to pay some small amount that they almost never collect, but that's where your protection is under law. These other forms of payment don't have those same protections. So if you turned to who you used, like a Zelle or a Cash App to try to recoup losses if someone ripped you off, you're out of luck.
Kathy, before you go, AARP is a fraud hotline. I'll let you get in a little plug for that. What is that number?
Yeah, it's not 24/7, so it's not a hotline, but it's a helpline. And 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. If you're not sure of something, if you feel you've been victimized, if you're worried about a loved one, call 877-908-3360, and you can actually talk to a human being, one of our many trained fraud specialists who are fraud fighter volunteers all over the country that are there to help you.
Kathy, thank you very much for your time. We're out of time. We appreciate you joining us. Kathy Stokes from AARP.